I'll guide you through the slides as well. I just want to note that Ozge and myself will be presenting, so I will focus on the radicalization channels, and Ozge will discuss de-radicalisation programs. But we're presenting this on behalf of our team, which also included Isabella Holmes, Nashita Rassan, and Sharon Al-Said Noor, and Kane Liu. So next slide, please. So much of what we will be discussing actually echoes many of the themes that our partners raised in the talks today. So across panels, particularly what was discussed regarding France also really resonates with the analysis within the UK. So just to contextualize the incidence of political violence in the UK here, as you can see, so political violence that is motivated by white supremacy ideology in orange here, you can see has increased, particularly from 2015. So you can see that there's the rise of right-wing political violence. Now, despite the differences between right-wing violence and Islamist political violence, with the former exceeding the latter, so you can see that there has been a decrease with political violence that's motivated by Islamist extremism. There is still a focus by state-led institutions and programs, political parties, and the media, which focus and amplify Islamist political violence and really conceptualize radicalization within the context of it originating within specific religious communities. And that really was the thread that ran through our analysis of the UK. You'll actually see that emerge even when we discuss de-radicalisation programs. So this seems to, in part, legitimize right-wing values and radicalization. Next slide, please. So this is despite the UK having the highest rate of failed and foiled right-wing plots in 2019 in the EU. And particularly to emphasize, in 2018, the UK saw the highest number of far-right marches in a generation. So discussing some of the channels of radicalization that first we have right-wing organizations, so non-government organizations such as Generation Identity. Generation Identity is a transnational organization which established a UK chapter called Identity UK. We also have Patriotic Alternative, which endorses ultra-nationalist anti-Semitism and anti-immigration ideologies. They also support conspiracy theories such as the Great Replacement Theory. What we found in our analyses was that these organizations in particular are very effective in utilizing social media platforms to disseminate their ideology and for recruitment, as well as using gaming platforms as well. We then also have non-mainstream political parties such as the English Defence League or EDL, Britain First, the UK Independence Party, UKIP, and the British National Party or the BNP. Now, what's important to note here is that these parties have rather permeable membranes. So there's a lot of cross membership that happens across these parties, where members will leave one party and join another, or oftentimes might be members of several political parties simultaneously. So we then have our third channel of radicalization that we focused on in the report, and this really formed the bulk of our analysis, which is state-led processes which delineate cultural and religious group boundaries and which establish idealized British values and identities. And these are rooted in nostalgic reinterpretations of British imperialism and history. And these in turn locate the causes of radicalization within specific communities, and specifically religious communities. And in this way, they institutionalize Islamophobia and racial hierarchies, which further engender right-wing ideologies. And this is also reflected in the muscular liberalist approach of the current government, the current conservative government as well. So if we can go to the next slide as well, just to visualize this for you. So what does the tapestry of right-wing radicalization look like in the UK, particularly in the context of the I-gap spectrum, so particularly in terms of perceived injustice and grievance, and then alienation and polarization. So first, do you mind clicking? There should be some animation on this slide. So yes, so first we have perceptions of injustice towards these idealized, recreated British values and identities are mainstreamed by media. So we can see this emerge in several different ways. So first, there's a focus within media on political violence and threat of terrorism rooted within religious communities, so rooted within Islamist ideology, as opposed to rooted within right-wing ideologies. We also have the very treatment of perpetrators of political violence. So there's a difference within the media. So research has found that the way that actors of political violence are framed very differently depending on their originating motives. So specifically, actors of right-wing ideology, actors who are motivated by right-wing ideologies are treated much more on an individualist level. So focuses on their personality traits or potentially their mental health, as opposed to actors who are motivated by jihadist ideologies, who are framed within a collectivist context, so framed within these actions being a cause of the ideology. So these are just one of the many examples of how media within the UK mainstreams right-wing ideologies and reconstructs these British idealized values that pose notions of others against what it means to be British and who is a member of the in-group. And so the media in this way disseminates the seeds of white superiority in far-right organizations and legitimizes their perceptions of injustice and grievance. So we can see here in the yellow box the far-right seeding context, which manifests in some of the political parties and organizations. So for example, how we see grievance and perceptions of injustice manifest. A report which looked at members of the BNP, so the British National Party, and members of UKIP, the UK Independence Party, found that over 2/3 of the members within that survey strongly opposed the statement that Islam does not pose a threat to Western society. So in this way, much as what Roman was discussing in terms of the interaction between perceptions of threat as emanating from jihadist ideology, you have the perceived response rooted in right-wing ideologies. So in turn, this grievance is internalized by members of these parties. And within the survey, they also found that over half of the members viewed that future violence between ethnic and religious communities in the UK was largely inevitable. And in turn, they supported the statement as always justifiable or sometimes justifiable in preparing for violence or engaging in armed conflict as a response to protect these idealized values of what it means to be British. So this in turn reflects increasing polarization. And in turn, these ideologies have been appropriated to a certain extent. Do you mind clicking, please? Just for the next animation. Oh, and one more, thank you. Have been largely appropriated by the Conservative Party. Sorry, we've gone back. Sorry. Have been largely appropriated by the Conservative Party. We see that in some of the commentary by the Prime Minister as well, in terms of including these British values and identities, as well as increasing intergroup conflict. And also we are seeing more recently the Labour Party accommodating in turn some of these cultural tools that are used by the Conservative Party to reinforce these notions of identity and nationalism, to themselves recreate nationalized and idealized values. So this is in contrast to several assessments by leading figures such as the chief for counterterrorism, Neil Basu, that the fastest growing threat, the fastest growing terrorism threat in the UK is from the far right, and that the UK continues to inaccurately gauge this threat. And this is particularly rooted in perceptions of where radicalization emanates from and what constitutes radicalization and terrorism. So I'd like to pass it over to Ozge now, who will talk about de-radicalization channels.
Thank you, Nelly, and thank you, Mihaya and Volodymyr, for bringing the panel together. So when it comes to de-radicalization in the UK, our report has shown that existing governmental channels of de-radicalization are nowhere near sufficient. So on our report, we have showed that the 9/11 in 2001 in US has changed the course and perception of radicalization across the world. Obviously, this included the UK. Between 1970s and 1990s, one of the most important radicalization agents in the UK was the Irish Republican Army, IRA. But since the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, the devolved administrations of the UK have replaced the Prevention of Terrorism Act, the PTA, and the Northern Ireland Act, the EPA, with the Terrorism Act 2000, which simply means the perceived radicalization agents in the eyes of the UK state has shifted from IRA to jihadist organizations. So a very short background, the US invasion of Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003 led to jihadist attacks on a global scale. This obviously included attacks in the UK, such as the Manchester attack. During the New Labour's time in power, the UK joined forces with the US to invade Iraq in March 2003. Since the 9/11 attack, Muslim communities has been the main groups that their radicalization strategies have primarily targeted in the UK. The most important aspect of the de-radicalization programs in the UK is the PREVENT program at the moment, which is a component of the UK's counter-terrorism strategy contest. The PREVENT program aims to protect against would-be terrorists, drawing on various assumptions about which Nelly already mentioned, about the sociological, psychological, or behavioral characteristics of the radicalized individuals. Rather than organizing effective integration programs, the PREVENT program normalizes everyday surveillance of specific communities and individuals and intervenes in these communities' lives before they actually radicalize. So another aspect of this program is that the PREVENT program holds schools, universities, and hospitals responsible to report individuals that may radicalize before these individuals actually radicalize. In this perspective, our report identified the ways in which Muslim youth in the UK has been imagined since the 9/11 attacks. They have been imagined as threatening, different, untrustworthy, and dangerous, which has been a perception to be adopted in policymaking, media framing, as well as academia. This approach also accounts for the wider institutionalization of Islamophobia in the UK. We have thus discussed on our report that it is not surprising that the PREVENT strategy document admits that its main focus is terrorism associated with Al-Qaeda. Far-right extremism is briefly touched upon in the document, which we obviously have read in full, but extreme right-wing radicalization is dismissed as low priority in the eyes of the UK state, with actors seen by the Conservative government as unorganized lone wolves incapable of causing much damage. So in this framework, due to the lack of governmental interest in the de-radicalization of far-right extremism, we have shown in our report that much of the labor in this area are carried out by non-government stakeholders of de-radicalization, such as charities, unions, student unions, and other non-governmental bodies. Among other stakeholders, we identified how the group Hope Not Hate is an effective example of an organization carrying out this work, founded largely in response to the rise of the far right, especially far-right groups, especially British National Party. Hope Not Hate released regular state of hate reports examining the threat of the rising far-right extremism in the UK. The organization also has a charitable arm that works with communities and groups to fight extremism, a political wing that pressures political parties to take action against right-wing extremism, and a trade union network that seeks to eradicate extremism and intolerance in the workplace. De-radicalisation pathways are also facilitated by the Exit UK for right-wing extremists. This group was set up by a former member of the neo-Nazi group, Combat 18, and Exit UK utilizes ex-extremists as a form of peer support for current members who wish to undergo through the de-radicalization process. As such, our report identified how much of the de-radicalization work is carried out by former members of far-right groups, or in some cases, parents of individuals who are current members of far-right organizations in the UK.